So in this session, as I told you before, we're going to talk about the vocabulary lesson plan, the observations that I saw when I was reading your lesson plans, your first lesson plans about ECRIF. We're going to talk about just a little bit, short version of an introduction to teaching grammar. Okay, Betty, Jesus, can you mute your microphone, please?
Okay.
Thank you. And also, we're going to talk about some activities in Aprendo, right? So please pay attention. Again, if you have any questions, you can unmute your microphone. I can answer you in this moment or in the chat, right? Very good. So let's start. All right. So first of all, let's talk about your lesson plans, all right? So I don't know if you had any problems when actually doing your lesson plan. I don't know if you felt frustrated using eCRIF. Maybe no, because maybe it wasn't your first time. But let me show you the first observation that I had was the activities from encounter to fluency, right? Remember that these activities have to be very sequenced. It means that they have to be connected with each other and also try to connect your context. Context means that try to use a topic that is a real life situation for your students. There's a quote here that I really like and that I found very interesting, and it says, bring the world into the classroom. And it's very true. Remember that your students maybe won't have the opportunity to go to United States, but at least try to bring some piece of United States here in the classroom, okay? Try to use topics that they will use in real life situations. And remember that your activities from the very beginning have to be very connected. It had to make sense. Sometimes we plan just because, oh, I need to write a remembering activity. Let's put this one. That's it, right? Can you mute your micro, please? No. Okay. Okay, let's continue. Right. So activities, remember, connect. And let me show you an example that I found. I mean, I didn't put an example from your lesson plans, no. It was from another semester. Let me check if I put it. Oh, no, not yet. Okay, so remember that activities, here we have to go from general to specific, sequence topics. And also if we're talking about grammar, remember that grammar have to be very inductive, right? So during this session, we're going to introduce some grammar introduction, like how can you teach grammar, but in speaking. Remember that in encounter, we can correct mistakes. Remember that this is the opportunity to introduce your topic, vocabulary words, right? Clarify, remembering, accuracy, right? This is the moment that students can make mistakes. Of course, you are monitoring them, and then you can correct instantly. In the internals, remember that we have the last chance. It means that it's the last opportunity for you to recall the mistakes that you heard before. Why? Because in the fluency, they are very independent. They need to produce everything that you actually you taught during these stages, right? So in the fluency, no corrections. So try to consider this for your future demo classes or your lesson plans. And the second observation, here we have the Bloom's taxonomy, the objective. So in this observation, I found that some of you, the objectives were very general. So I hope that you read my observations from the feedback. And here I'm going to put an example from another student from another country. So not about this semester, another semester. And I would like you to read this objective with me. So here we have students will be able to use family nouns to talk about their own family in a communicative activity. So do you consider that this objective is very general, or what do you think it's missing here?
I think it's really general for me.
Okay, Natalia. So it is very general, as you said. Why? Because here we have used family nouns. So what family nouns, right? So
Yeah.
try to consider writing the vocabulary that they are going to use in a parenthesis or something, so we can know what family nouns you're talking about. And here to talk about. So I don't know. I think that this verb talk is not necessary to use it in an objective. That's why we need to use Bloom's taxonomy. And in a while, I'm going to show you some action verbs that you can use in your lesson plans. So it's very general. Talk about their own family in a communicative activity. So this one is very important in a communicative activity. What kind of communicative activity are students going to do in the fluency stage? In a role play. In a discussion. In, I don't know, another thing, right? In an interview, right? So be very specific when you're writing your objective, okay? And let me show you. Here you have, actually in Aprendo, you have a section that is links, Bloom's taxonomy. Try to click on the first link or second link, and you will have access to the page that I'm going to show you later, okay? So here, this is a good material for you in order to write your objective for future lessons. And here is one, right? Here is one. As you can see, we have the Bloom's definition, we have the remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And as you can see here, you have some action verbs that you can use when you want to write your objective. But first of all, analyze your fluency activity, okay? So sometimes you can write objectives that are related to the remembering stage or are related to the encounter, but remember that the fluency is your objective. And here, for example, we have applying. If we are going to have lesson plans for beginner lessons, remember that beginner students, they can't criticize, they can't justify. Why? Because they are in a basic level. So sometimes we're going to be remain in the remembering, in understanding or applying. Why? Because it's a very basic level, right? Of course, as you can see, we have in the Bloom's taxonomy action verbs that are very common in, for example, in this stage, right? Or even in creating. But try to use from the remembering, understanding, or applying stages, right? Those verbs are going to help you a lot. And here I found something interesting. I found this information from a TESOL website. I'm going to share that page with you. And for example, it says, we must remember a concept before we can understand it. We must understand a concept before we can apply it. So think about your students, your beginner students. We must able to apply a concept before we analyze it, because analyze, it's very complex for students that are in a basic level. We must have analyzed the concept before we can evaluate it. We must have remembered, understood, applied, analyzed, and evaluated a concept before we can create. So as you can see, here you have the stages. So creating, it's a very difficult stage. It's like the last one for Bloom's taxonomy. And it means that these students are able to do the remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, and evaluating concepts. They can have all these complex knowledge in order to create something. But we're talking about beginners, so maybe they are very in the remembering, understanding, or applying if we're talking about Bloom's taxonomy, right? I don't know if you have any questions. Please, you can ask the questions here in the chat. Let me check. No questions? Okay, so maybe at the end you will have some questions and I will answer them, don't worry. So let me continue with the presentation. So now we have the third observation that I found, and be aware of the level of students. Remember that we're going to plan lesson plans for adults, beginners. It means that they are in level 1, right? So remember that adults, they are trying to learn the language. Remember that you are going to teach them how to fly, honestly. Maybe they have some vocabulary words isolated, but still try to teach them basic vocabulary, basic grammar structure. Why? Because they're basic, right? And you're going to introduce them to the English language. Yes. So for future lessons, please plan your lesson plans for adults or beginners. And imagine that you're going to give a 40-minute class. So in the time section that you have in your lesson plan, try to plan for a 40-minute class, right? As you can see right now, we are not going to have demos, but I'm going to explain you the next dynamic that we're going to have for lesson planning. And I have my 4 observations, and it is the description of activities. Okay, so this is an example of another person. And here we have, for example, the encounter. So try to read this one. For example, it says a teacher. The teacher is going to ask them what they did last week or vacations and check that they say the words in the correct tense. Okay, and in the students are going to talk about what they did last week or vacation to the teacher in front of the whole group, or just sit in the chair, but they have to share. Okay.
Teacher.
So you can, yes.
Selena wrote that she had a question in the chat.
Let me check, don't worry. The thing is that okay. Let me check. Teacher, yes, Selena, what happened?
Okay, I unmuted my my thing. Teacher, it's the thing is that I'm very confused when we talk about A1 level. Because how much English do they have? Like they really don't know anything, like any word.
Yes, they don't know any word. We're talking about true beginners. It means that you need to be very aware of the vocabulary that you're going to use. So it's very basic.
Okay, but it is very hard to plan a class of 40 minutes with very easy activities, don't you think?
Yes and no, Selena.
It's because I haven't given a class to real people from that stage, so I'm very nervous to do something that is wrong.
No, don't be. Remember that we're still going to work with a pair. So with your pair, you're going to have your lesson planning. And actually, when I talked about eCRIF is something beautiful. Why? Because it is going to help true beginners to understand, for example, a vocabulary class about English. So eCRIF is very useful in these situations. Why? Because you have a lot of stages to practice with. Right? You have your encounter. In the encounter, you can have actually a 5-minute activity, right? And then you go to the clarify, and then there you're going to clarify what you thought in the first stage. And then you have the remembering. So as you can see, it's not like PPP, like you only have 3 stages, right? But eCRIF have a lot of stages, and you have more time to do it, and you have more time to actually teach a lesson for a 40-minute class. And that's what I tell you. When I was certified for an English course, we used eCRIF, and I had real students. I had real true beginner students. And one day, one student came to my classroom, and her name was Elsa. I will remember her forever. And she said, "Teacher, yo no voy a poder. Yo no entiendo nada de inglés. Yo nunca he tenido una clase de inglés, entonces pues a ver cómo me va." So I was really frustrated, because imagine having this student in your classroom the first day. So I was freaking out, of course. So my activities were very basic. My topics were actually basic because my coordinator told me, you know what, plan something that is very useful for your students. Consider the vocabulary words that they are going to learn. That's why you have eCRIF. So later on, I gave my class. And in the last session, in the fluency stage, because remember, I had supportive language, Elsa could actually make a sentence using the supportive language that I gave and using the vocabulary word that I taught in the very beginning. So I can tell you, Selena, it helps your basic students, it helps true beginners, and that's why eCRIF is very useful, right? So don't worry about the time. Remember that in this case, we're not having demos, but lesson planning, the lesson planning is for you to analyze the activities, to visualize your fictional students, and it's going to be just a preparation for you, maybe for the future. And that's why I'm going to help you whenever you are uploading your lesson plan. I will give you feedback, right, instantly. Don't worry.
Thank you, teacher.
Don't worry, Selena. Do you have any other question? Another person? No?
I have another question. In real life situation, with adults that are beginners, teacher, like you have to be always there correcting them. Is it very hard?
It is not. It is hard. It could be very hard for the teacher correcting your students once in a while. But remember that you have the encounter, the clarify, the remembering.
Okay.
Those stages are the ones that you're going to correct them, and not correcting them like, no, that's wrong. No, Jesus, very wrong. No, you can't speak English. No, it means that you're just guiding them. Like, oh, remember this word that I taught you before? Is this one? Oh, maybe you can use this one, right? So for the internalized, they are prepared because you already prepared them in the previous stages.
Okay, I got it. Thank you, teacher.
Very good. So Karime, yes, we're going to continue with the same pair for your next lesson plans. And Jesus, thank you. Very good. Thank you for sharing your opinion. Okay, I will be aware of your comments. Okay, so let's continue here with the 4 observation. Description of activities. Yes, as you can see, it's very general. I don't understand the explanation of this person, right? So be specific. Describe activity, everything with details. Remember that I don't know what you're planning. So when I'm reading your lesson plans, I'm like, okay, I have this question. And that's why I write some questions, because I want you to answer them for the correction activity, right? And here in this case, this person didn't write the time. It's very important to write the time here. And the activity or task, just write the task, right? Or the activity, the name of the activity. In this case could be like brainstorming. That's it, right? Because here in the description, you are going to write everything with details. And as you can see, another thing is that, well, this person didn't write the materials, CCQs, you can include them here, or if it's a BAKT activity. So as you can see, it's very wrong, right? I mean, I wouldn't understand this. Okay, so you can use here, for example, teacher will ask them what they did last week. Students will talk about the last vacations. Teacher will show a picture, students will answer to these questions, okay? So here you can actually use these sentences, teacher will or students will, okay? Now I have another observation, and it's the supportive language, the specific phrases. For example, in this case, this person put specific phrases, it means the supportive language, like where was, play, used to, and did. Okay, so do you consider that this is a supportive language for students? And actually it's a copy-paste, as you can see.
Yes.
Yeah, so I can notice, I'm not blind. But supportive language means that some fixed phrases that students are going to use for the fluency or even in the internalized stage, right? Here in the vocabulary, this person wrote past simple, right? So no, I mean, that is not a vocabulary. You need to be very specific what vocabulary words are you going to use. In the grammar point, yes, but as you can see, check. This person is going to teach where was, and then played, and then used to, and did. Imagine
Teacher,
this class. Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is it necessary to like fill in all of those things? Because I think sometimes, I mean, I don't know what to write there, or I don't think like, how can I say it? Like, for example, is it obligatory to always write ICQs?
It is not necessary. For example, if you want to include ICQs in the whole of the stages, go ahead. I won't judge you, right? But ICQs have to be very useful, right? That you consider that this is going to be useful for my students because maybe my instructions are going to be very long, for example.
Because I think that sometimes when, for example, if they are going to just discuss, I mean, like, what can I like ask there, because I mean they're just going to discuss. So I think so it's not obligatory to always write ICQs or CCQs.
No, sometimes it's not necessary, right? For example, if you have short instructions and if you don't want to include them, it's okay. Don't worry. But if you want to, I mean, if you say, I consider that this activity, they're going to, I need to make sure that they understood, put them.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you.
Very good. You're welcome. So yes, the specific phrases, it means that fixed phrases that are going to be useful for your students in the whole lesson plan, right? These phrases, for example, supportive language like, I like, and then a line. Because that phrase is going to be useful for me in one activity. Okay, so those supportive language, yes.
So this
Selena,
is Selena.
okay.
I'm Selena. In Caro's in my lesson plan, you wrote there that that's the supportive language. So we should include our supportive language in specific phrases.
Yes, specific phrases means that is a supportive language. So here in what it says, specific phrases include your supportive language there, your sentences.
Okay, thank you, teacher.
You're welcome. And this supportive language, you can actually put them in the PowerPoint presentation. So it doesn't mean that your students are going to learn it by heart. It means that if they have a question, they can go back to that supportive language and yes. I remember that my teacher told me that if I want to say something that I like, I have to say, I like doing exercise because I have already, my supportive language is I like. So students can go back and look at the supportive language and say, yes, I remember. And then they can produce it with the vocabulary word that you are teaching them. That's why supportive language is very important in basic levels, right? Because they need help. I mean, they need that process to understand and to remember those vocabulary words. And then another observation is aware of mistakes, and I'm going to show you a lesson plan, and I want you, I'm going to read it for you. So it says, the activity is a role play, and the teacher, it says, the teacher is going to give them a little piece of paper. Inside the papers is write the name of some famous people, and they have to pretend be them saying things from their past. For example, if Chris Evans, they have to say things he did before, like movies or series, but don't have to say movies or series. I'll know he did like the Avengers because it's going to be very easy and fast. Okay. So, I mean, do you understand the description? No, right? I mean, it's very complex to understand. Be aware of your mistakes, okay? Whenever you are describing your activity. So here we have the students have to take a piece of paper, see what famous people they have to role play. They have 30 seconds to think about the career of that person. After that, they start describing that person. After that, talk about the career of that person, movies in which they have come out or series they know, and their classmates have to guess what famous person he or she is talking about. So remember that another person is going to read your lesson plan. Consider your mistakes. So before uploading your lesson plan, make sure that you don't have punctuation marks. I mean, if you're missing punctuation marks or if your structure is correct, if I'm going to understand it, right? So make sure that those kind of mistakes.